Much.
So we're talking a lot about algae today, and you have an algae company, no less.
That's correct.
Sorry, did I stop
Okay,
sharing?
no, you haven't stopped yet.
You haven't stopped sharing your screen, so
Sorry. Oh, here we go. Okay.
Okay.
there you go. All right, Nathaniel, you're all open now.
Okay, great. Well, if this works.
Yep, there we are.
Great. Hi, I'm Nathaniel Jackson. I'm the CEO of TrueAlgae. I'm delighted to hear about the previous panelists because it seems like the nexus of all these conversations is about algae. Algae is truly remarkable and has many, many applications. One of the things that we're focused on right now is the production of algae, which it addresses a key need in the world. Farmers in the US and the world are in trouble because they're hooked on chemical fertilizers. This not only leaches the soil, but also promotes nitrogen runoff, also emits nitrous oxide. And ironically, the use of chemical fertilizers actually promotes the use of chemical fertilizers because it weakens the plants. And so ultimately, the results are rather alarming when you look at the environment. According to the FAO, roughly a third of the world's agricultural land is now degraded because of the use of chemical fertilizer. See, I'm trying to advance it here. Okay, great. So TrueAlgae, essentially, we manufacture and scale algae. We use it primarily right now as a liquid biofertilizer, but it can be used for a lot of different applications. We got into the algae business largely because it's so incredibly efficient in terms of reproducing. We can double the biomass in every 24 hours. It's also very effective in a number of other uses, but our primary focus right now is using it as a liquid biofertilizer that we sell in bulk to large farms. As you can see from the picture, we have a fairly substantial 36-ton facility. It's a cheap, highly modular vertical photobioreactor. We can build these close to the large farm areas which use these types of, can use organic fertilizer. This particular plant is in Dover, Florida, which is in the heart of strawberry country, but we're poised to build more plants as demand continues to grow. One of the things that really attracted us to the algae sector was the fact that we can harvest 5 days a week, 50%. And the margins are quite impressive given the fact that there's really only water, electricity, and CO2 as the inputs. Our primary expense, frankly, is direct labor for production, but we're still able to demonstrate 75% gross margins. Our primary focus right now for sales is with large fruit and vegetable farms. And we're trying to solve their problem, not just the problem of the environment. The big problem, particularly with the farms that we see, are massive erosion and sterilization of soil due to 50 or 60 years of using chemical fertilizers. Or as one farmer in Florida told us, the dirt is tired. And because of this, their farm productivity has plateaued and they have to use more and more chemical fertilizers just to maintain the same level of production. And consequently, farm profits, for a variety of reasons, have been shrinking for the last 6-7 years. And the last year and a half have really been quite devastating for a lot of farms, not only in the fruit and vegetable sector, but also in the row crop sector. So our solution, we call it putting life back into the soil. The algae product acts as an organic prebiotic, which supplements the soil microbes. And we can use this in conjunction with chemical fertilizer. And we've also been able to demonstrate that we can cut back on the amount of chemical fertilizers and yet still have higher productivity. The algae basically helps to activate the beneficial microbiome environment and thus impacts the rhizosphere, the root structure, and ultimately the plant growth. And the beauty of it all is it's actually cheaper per acre season for our production and sales compared to the current chemical and pesticides which are used on strawberries. These figures are from California strawberries. So the value proposition for farmers is quite compelling. We've been able to demonstrate using third-party sources because all of our data that we used here come from either Florida Ag Research or Pacific Ag Research, which is actually the largest entity which works with farms on testing soil and field results. They've demonstrated in several different fruits and vegetables a greater yield per acre of 20% or more. We've also been able to demonstrate that the farmers can have higher production even with using as little as 25% of their current chemical fertilizer needs. It improves the soil fertility, basically by supplementing the mycorrhizae, fungi, and also has the impact of increasing the root architecture and length and rigor. Another very beneficial effect, particularly for perishables like strawberries and various different types of berries, we've been able to demonstrate for the last several years increased water retention and up to 100% improvement of shelf life. We have a number of time-lapse videos that we could share with the audience if they're interested. Our go-to-market strategy, we have an unfair advantage. Really, our vertical photobioreactor is cheaper than other closed-loop systems and certainly a higher quality output compared to open runway algae systems, which still the majority of the world that produces algae are in open runway systems. Ours is a closed-loop system. In terms of our customers, we've been able to approach large berry farms, both in Florida and California. We just gave them field tests and let them come back to us once they've had results to purchase, and we've had very gratifying results from that strategy. We sell directly in bulk to these targeted fruit and vegetable markets, and we're also working with a few distribution companies to sell to the smaller farms. We have very favorable unit economics. We are able to scale the plant that you saw in Dover, Florida. We can scale that up dramatically if need be. The interesting thing is we can scale up and scale down. If we have to cut back on production, it's actually very easy to cut back, as well as it's easy to expand production. Obviously, unit cost goes down significantly as production increases because our largest expense is really labor, and that's not linear. The labor expense is not linear. We have very high net margins, as I mentioned earlier. Looking at lifetime value of customer, these are based on current sales numbers. We assume it's at least $625,000 per customer. And the first acquisition is always the most expensive because we've had to hire somebody to break into a new market. But after that, it's really the cost of the product is quite low, so it's easy to give away. For the field tests, it just requires our salespeople to go out and spend time with them over the course of a season to monitor the progress. So the customer acquisition costs are dropping once we penetrate into a market. We already have sales. We've actually been in operation for almost 3 years now. We are selling to some of the largest berry farms in both Florida as well as in California, which are the biggest berry markets. The plant that you saw the picture of is a 36 metric ton facility. We also have a licensing partner who's doing trial production in Mexico with very favorable results there. Our output can be as high as 40,000 gallons a month, so we can produce and sell really all over the country. But again, as we expand, we can expand this production. We have defensible IP. We've filed for a mode of production patents in the US, as well as 10 other of the largest agricultural markets in the world. And we are just about to file for mode of action, which describes the action in the soil. The team, very experienced team. I think that the primary person I should focus on is really our Chief Technology Officer, who developed this technology. Over 20 years of water sanitation and algae experience. Also, I'd like to point out Angela Sepsis, who was a former VP of sales for Martech Biosciences, which is the most successful algae company in the world to date. And she managed a sales team that generated over 400 million in sales. So we're delighted to have her on board, helping us expand into our multiple different markets. This capacity will enable us to go into other verticals, including nutraceuticals. We primarily work with chlorella as our strain of algae. It's a very common supplement, so we can efficiently use this in a dry form for human consumption. Also, we've done some initial research in chicken feed and fish feed. So we'd be delighted to talk to Nathan and also Tamara about ways in which we might be able to produce this very efficiently and give them low cost access to algae, which can be, they can use very, they're using their own proprietary mixes. We're also started testing in the lawn care, sod, and golf course markets. We've done some tests there, and we've been able to demonstrate that we can show quite good results without any nitrogen, which is a limitation in a number of these markets, which are facing regulation to drop back on nitrogen consumption. And finally, in lots of countries in Asia, algae face masks are, we've become aware that this is a very popular market and has extremely high margins, but that's well down the road. But we're just trying to demonstrate that this algae production, which is very efficient, can be used in a lot of different ways. So that's it for today. We are still in fundraising mode, so we'll be happy to talk to investors more specifically after that. And here's our contact information. But right now, I'm more than happy to answer any questions from the audience. We really appreciate this opportunity. So thank you so much to the Braid Theory team.
Thanks, Nathaniel. Appreciate it. Also, love it when we can tie in all of our presenters in when we're using algae and fertilizer and stuff for the oceans and for the earth and for livestock. So it's always good to have that kind of tie-in, and not without some kind of purpose there anyway. So it's kind of our thing. Any questions, please use the Q&A feature to ask any questions to Nathaniel. And we have our first question come through. Do you have a process? Do you have to process the algae, or do soil microbes make the appropriate phytases? I also have another question. Does it that's kind of related to this? In the processing, is it freeze dried or is it wet? How does it come?
The outcome is actually, it's a liquid biofertilizer that can be added directly to the irrigation systems of the farmers. And so we don't do any additional additives or anything. It's essentially an algae bioproduct that we can either add to the irrigation system or it can be applied foliar. But it's a liquid biofertilizer. It's not dry.
All right. So that's the first part of the question. How does the soil process?
Well, it basically it enhances the microbiome which then impacts the rhizosphere, which ultimately improves the plant health. So but it's a completely organic and natural process.
Well, so it's a chemical process and not a biological one. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's a biological process.
Oh, okay. All right.
Biological process.
Okay.
It's enhancing the microbiome.
Got it. And what is what's the feedback from the farmers like?
It's been really good, and I think the best feedback is return customers. So typically, what happens with working with a farm is after you convince them to do a field trial, they start with a relatively small amount, maybe 2 to 5 acres. And the only request that we have of them is that we can monitor it weekly, see and check the data of the soil as it goes on, and also the productivity. So after a season, then we, obviously have the discussion about converting from trial to purchase. And thus far, we've had a very high percentage of companies which have converted from trial to purchase. But we've now been in operation for between 2 and 3 years. So we've gone through a couple of years of cycles, and the majority of our clients have come back for much more in terms of their orders. So that's that's the biggest stamp of approval, is when first of all they expand the amount of acreage they want to use, and that usually happens pretty quickly. They go from 5 to 50 to 100 acres with the tests, and then convert into sales, and then we've gotten repeat sales.
So Nathaniel, you talked about defensible IP, and you have split that into a number of areas, mainly around production and modes of action. But you've had some other patents as well. What about the product itself? Is the product itself patentable? And what's the IP protections around that?
Not the product itself. We have a team, law firm which manages our global IP, and they suggested first that we protect our mode of production, which they've done. They filed in the U.S. about 1 year and 3/4 ago, so we anticipate getting the final patent approval within the next 6 months. And we filed the mode of production in 10 other jurisdictions. The mode of action actually would describe how the product works in the soil itself, and we've been working with both chemists and biologists to help us explain how that process works. So that's not protection for the product per se, but actually defending how it works in the soil itself. It's a mode of action approach, which is fairly broad, but we have to use third-party data to demonstrate how it has affected, for example, strawberries and blueberries, and we have those data now.
Okay. What about ease of use for the farmers? Is it easy? Is it difficult?
Yes.
Can anyone do it?
Yes, and that was a key part of our technology, is the fact that it's extremely easy to use. We sell in bulk, which is these mini totes, which are 1,000 liters or roughly 250 gallon. And this is the typical way that liquid fertilizer is sold. And what they can do is they can hook it up directly to their irrigation systems, because the actual product is roughly 6 to 10 microns. It doesn't gum up the works when it comes to foliar applications or irrigation applications. So it's actually very similar to any other type of fertilizer or application. There's nothing new or extraordinary they have to do.
And on the investment side, you said you're looking for investments. Do you have current investors? Are some of those farmers? Are they people that have utilized the product and have confidence?
Yes. Actually, our first major investor was our very first client, who told us at the time, because we were pitching to him to invest, and he said, "Look, I run a farm. I'm not an investor." But after the first season, he invested $200,000 in us because he could see the value, and frankly, that he earned a lot more than that from our free product. So he just sunk it back into investing into our company. But I'm a little hesitant to explain too much about how far we are along because I'm not sure of the audience, but if they're all accredited investors, but we'd be happy to, get into those numbers with accredited investors.
Sure. Well, that's all we have time for, folks. Thank you very much, Nathaniel. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.